Hello, Matt Bradshaw here, and welcome to Horrendous, films that go bump in your mind. Today we're looking at 1964's The Flesh Eaters. For me, the road to The Flesh Eaters was lined with trashy horror magazines. I first heard of the film when it was featured on the cover of Famous Monsters of Filmland. At the time, I mistakenly thought the movie was based on a similarly titled story from the August 1972 issue of Tales of Voodoo from Eerie Publications, but the two were not connected. At any rate, I chalked it up to yet another horror movie that was out of my reach in those dark days before VHS rental stores. But by the 1990s, the bootleg VHS market made it possible to track down all sorts of weird movies that I'd only been able to read about. I gambled $20 and ordered a home-duped VHS copy of The Flesh Eaters from an ad in Psychotronic Video Magazine. Even by VHS standards, that tape's quality was not great, and I suspect it was a second or third generation copy. But the movie immediately became one of my favorites. Grant Murdoch, played by Byron Sanders, is a classic 1950s-style square-jawed hero, though this movie is from the 60s. He takes control of every situation thanks to his sheer damn manliness. He's a pilot who runs a private charter service, and he's dodging creditors as he tries to make an honest buck. The plucky and resourceful Jan Letterman, played by Barbara Wilkin, offers Murdoch a ton of cash to fly her boss, boozy starlet Laura Winters, played by Rita Morley, to Provincetown, where she's opening a new play. But between the incoming storm and some really scary-ass engine noises, Murdoch and company are forced to set down on an uncharted island. The island's sole inhabitant is a greasy little mad scientist named Peter Bartell, played by Martin Kozlek. Bartell claims to be researching shellfish, but his sinister nature is pretty evident. In fact, he's all about the sinister. Rounding out the cast is Omar the Irritating Beatnik. I have to say I respect his efforts to keep his tunes with him in those pre-digital, pre-iPod, pre-Walkman days, but I question the practicality of spinning vinyl on a raft. Seriously, you'll just want to smack this guy. But not even he deserves the cruel trick that fate has in store for him. Modern audiences will have a different idea of what passes for a flesh eater, but the ones here are a bit different. The good professor is actually awaiting the arrival of a swarm of microscopic flesh-eating organisms. These carnivorous little SOBs were cooked up by Nazi scientists during World War II and are just now drifting to shore for reasons. Bartell is looking to profit from the creatures if he can manage to keep from having his face eaten off. This is the only feature-length film we ever got from director Jack Curtis, though he was also known for his voice work in some early anime imports to the US, including Speed Racer, Marine Boy, and Kimba the White Lion. When I bought that first VHS bootleg, the murky image and far from perfect audio seemed like part of the movie's charm. At the time, The Flesh Eaters was a mostly forgotten film that could only be seen through a haze of second or third generation video duplication. That said, when a pristine print of the film arrived on DVD from Dark Sky Films, I learned to love this old favorite all over again. I had never dreamed you could see that level of detail, and the image on the Shout Factory Blu-ray disc is even more impressive. Interestingly, both the DVD and Blu-ray do not include the red-tinted finale that was part of the film for many years. Also missing is the flashback sequence of Nazi scientists testing out the flesh eaters in a lab. Since both of these were added to the film by distributors, they weren't part of Jack Curtis's original vision. The Nazi lab scenes appear as extras on the discs, but the blood-red finale is nowhere to be found. Flesh Eaters is very much of its time, but it nicely bridges the gap between the family-friendly monster movies of the 50s and the more gore-spattered offerings of the 1960s. Tim Lucas of Video Watchdog magazine said, "If Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood Feast was the first gore film, The Flesh Eaters was the first good one." And oh yeah, this one can get pretty gory. Here are some fun facts about The Flesh Eaters. I love this British VHS box cover because that cover image is not even from this movie. I think it's actually a still from 1977's The Incredible Melting Man. The effect that shows daylight through Omar's dissolved midsection is real low-tech, but it's oddly effective, especially since up until this point, Omar has been our comic relief. Co-producer, screenwriter, and storyboard artist Arnold Drake also created the Doom Patrol for DC Comics. The poster has a downright confusing tagline. I'm not even sure what that means. To avoid confusion with The Flesh Eaters, the title of George A. Romero's 1968 film Night of the Flesh Eaters was changed to Night of the Living Dead. And our protagonist Grant Murdoch has a tough guy bravado that reminds me a bit of Ash from the Evil Dead movies, though Murdoch's weapons aren't nearly as cool. I highly recommend The Flesh Eaters. Ultimately, what we have here is a nifty little melodrama with some interestingly over-the-top characters and some decent gore. Give it a look.